psychometric social work from TISS. Her forte is recruitment and selection and has expertise in union negotiations, employee engagements, employer branding usage, and interpretation of psychometric tools. She has an experience of around 23 years in HR with different companies like HCL, Porygon, ITC Infotech Limited, Virtual Dynamics, and Titan. Ma'am, please do a value addition to the summit.
Good afternoon. Members on the dais, off the dais. I am actually standing in between your lunchtime. So I am not going to do a very long and detailed kind of a discussion. Most of the topics as far as managing attrition has been taken care of by Mr. Rao as well as Neeraj. Neeraj has given you a perspective from the IT industry, and Mr. Rao has given you a thing from what we today call as the old economy. I am lucky because I did have the opportunity to work both in the old economy as well as the new economy. And believe me, it's all the same. Attrition does not mean a person is leaving the organization. He does not leave the organization, he leaves his manager. I'd like to start off from where Neeraj had completed his session. The first trigger for an attrition is not because he does not like an organization or just because he sees some new company which has come in from XYZ country. The first trigger for a person to think for another job is primarily because something what his boss has said or something what his colleague has said has touched a raw nerve. And that is a trigger which you have to be extremely careful as prospective HR managers or the current practicing HR managers. When I finished my career and when I finished my education and I walked in, I joined Titan Industries as a counselor. And when I joined them as a counselor, they said that, your primary job is going to be talking to people who are unhappy and, why they want to move out. And at that point of time, Titan had just begun. So it was one of the most respected industries at that point of time because A, it was a Tata group, and B, the kind of environment that was being given in a factory environment, in a factory setup, it was one of the best that you could ever see. You walk in, it was absolutely clean. It was a necessity. I mean, you could not have dust anywhere inside the factory. But even here, why was attrition becoming such a big issue? So while I was talking to the people and things like that, my boss came in and said, we don't want you to do any more of this counseling business. You please become a HR manager. So I said, I'm not from HR. How do I do it? He said, no. This is a task that's given to you. This is your stretch. As far as we are concerned, you're a management trainee, so go ahead and do it. And that was a challenge. Probably if I had continued in Titan as a counselor, believe me, I would have left in 3 months. It would have been boring for me. The moment I got this challenging opportunity of saying, okay, you have no clue about what has to be done in a HR or an IR kind of an environment, there was a learning opportunity that was given to me. And I can proudly say that we were the first one to create this concept of what is called as a business HR. So if you take the factory, we had different functions. You had a case-making plant, you had an assembly plant, you had an auto-turning component plant. So each of these plants had one exclusive HR resource, and we were called as unit personnel officers. Our job as a unit personnel officer was to know the history or probably the horoscope of every single individual who was there. So we had to know right from the day he was born to what he did, where he studied, whose parents were, what they did, what is his aspiration, what does he want to do. And believe me, that talking to every single employee changed the entire perspective. And when I carried this back into a software industry, it really made a lot of difference. When I moved into the software industry, I had a boss who said, we were a team of 6 HR unit personal officers, or the BU HRs as what is called in the software industry. He only had one statement to make. He said, any HR who is sitting in front of a 14-inch monitor is not HR. You are just a secretary. If you are HR, you will not be at your desk, you will be on the floor. So if you take it in from a manufacturing setup, when you are on the floor, you will be able to feel the pulse of what is going on in each and every person. You will be able to pick up the nuance as to what has gone wrong. And that is our trigger point. For a good HR, the moment you are able to identify the trigger point, you call the person out separately, start talking to him. You don't counsel him. You are nobody to advise anyone. Just talk to him. And believe me, within 5 minutes, the person starts pouring out everything to you. He finds his own solution. He doesn't even want you to help him. The very fact that he puts all his thoughts out, it comes out in a logical manner. He realizes that he's been such a fool in terms of, wanting to quit, wanting to leave, and that he's been cursing his manager. Many times he comes back and he says, this is what my manager did. I think I'm going to go and talk to him and tell him that what he said was wrong. And if you have patiently listened to him for that, then you have done your job. So the first thing for all of us as HR practitioners, as HR students, you have to learn to listen. You have to be patient enough to listen to what is going on the floor. And as good HR, you have to track the pulse. If you are able to track the pulse, you create your own tracker. You have a team of 10 people. In IT world, today most of you guys go back into an IT world. When you go to an IT world, if you have a team of 10 people, you will be able to find the group dynamics of what is happening in that amongst those 10 guys. Find out the one who's going to be most affected. See if he's a key performer for you. If he's a key performer, then you have to try and see that what is it that is keeping him going and what is it that will make him leave. If you're able to pinpoint that, then you can start reversing your attrition. There is no point in talking to an employee after he puts in his resignation letter. Because once he puts in his resignation letter, he has switched off. He doesn't care anymore. He does not want to perform. He just wants to go. So all our efforts of holding him back and telling him no, you have to serve this 1 month notice. In fact, at that point of time, you are actually creating more damage for yourself than letting him go. If you let him go nicely, he will go and speak well about you outside. He creates your brand unconsciously. The same thing is when in my previous organization, we had what is called as, when we were tracking this attrition, we had it in 3 formats. We had what is called as a gestation period. And then we had what was called as the infant mortality period. And then we had as a full term. Now, the reason why this was happening was, we said 0 to 3 months, when the person is just new, when he has not acclimatized himself to the organization, you will have to hold him much more than what would be required for any other person. It's very simple to your normal pregnancy time. Your first 3 months are very critical. So in your first 3 months, when you are able to hold the person, he starts trusting you a lot more. He starts trusting the manager a lot more. 6 to 9 months, 3 months to 9 months is when you have to be more careful, because whatever damage happens at that time, it is irreversible. If you have ended up creating a negative image in his mind, he is going to carry it with him till he leaves the organization. How many ever years later? That particular thought process that is there in his mind is not going to go away easily. And then you come to the full term or the crisis attrition. That's where you have to look at what Neeraj spoke about, the healthy and the unhealthy. You have to have attrition, because if you do not have attrition, you cannot sustain the organization. You need to be sure as to whom are you going to let go. Are you letting go of your top cream, or are you letting go of your bottom 5? If you're letting go of your bottom 5, you should be very happy. But if you're losing your top 5, then you have a problem. So like what both of them said, attrition is a given. It's going to happen. So we need to manage it. So the way we manage it is track attrition. And track attrition not in terms after the person puts in his resignation. You'll have to do it one step before. Feel the pulse on the floor. And when you feel the pulse on the floor, you will be able to really, really reverse the entire methodology, the entire thought process of the employee. And a lot of people assume that, because there is no work-life balance, that's why people quit. It's not so. You give him the work-life balance. You tell him, okay, you can work from home. You can do this. Still, there are people who will quit. So the trigger is different. And the trigger can be arrested only if we as HR practitioners, we as budding HR managers learn to listen. If we cannot listen, then believe me, attrition can never be managed. And once you know that whatever you have done, you are not going to be able to reverse this particular attrition process, then you have to go to your backup plan. So when you have a project which is, and believe me, many of the people leave when the project is at the most critical stage. So what have I done to mitigate that risk? Do I have another employee in my team who can just take over from him and proceed? Have I trained the rest of my team members sufficiently? So mitigating risk becomes an integral part of managing attrition. You have to, because sometimes, irrespective of whatever you say, the personal reasons might be more compelling. Sometimes it might even be a simple issue like a manager's ego. The manager will say, I will not speak to him. A lot of misconception is that HR has to do everything. It's not the HR who is responsible for attrition. HR is not responsible for attrition. I do not know why Neeraj didn't touch on that. Because we don't decide. HR does not decide the increases. It's your line manager who decides the increases. The line manager has a kitty. He is given so much money and he says, please distribute it. He decides whether XY has to get 20%, 25%, 5%, 3%. But when the message goes to the employee, they say that HR is bad. So the culprit is completely different. The culprit is sitting somewhere else. And when you go and ask the culprit to please speak to the employee, they will not do it. So sometimes, many times you lose very good resources because of the ego or whatever stands in the way of a manager wanting to speak to his own employee. Anyway, he's decided to go. Why should I speak to him? That's the attitude. So to manage attrition, feel the pulse on the floor, talk to them, listen to them. Because while they're telling you something, they're actually conveying a lot of other messages. And you need to be astute enough to pick it up. And that's the training that we will all have to give our young budding HR managers. HR is not easy. HR is tough. And I'm happy to be part of that tough group. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for explaining the attritions in different industries and different ways to manage it.